when we last talked, we were just sort of talking about the micro versus macro in what we're listening for as we're creating a mix and how we listen to music. And so we had some great input from you guys on just your thought process in that. But we ended up with this interesting question about how, you mentioned the Instagram sort of, Charlie asked about board mixes and how management and you as the engineer handle, like, why does this board mix sound the way it does? What can we do to fix it or make it better? And you said, you know what, nowadays it's more about what's on Instagram. Like somebody holds up their phone in the middle of the show and they record and then post. We're kind of checking our mixes and what the PA sounds like through somebody's phone. So because so many of our tribe is from the house of worship space, that's really become true even more so this year as we focused more on streaming and either live streaming a service or pre-recording and broadcasting after the fact. And a lot of our engineer friends have struggled because they don't have the room, they don't have the PA, they don't have the crowd to maybe either enhance or mask some of the deficiencies in their mix. So a lot of them have gotten really better at mixing, at the craft. But now I think there's been such a focus on how do I get this thing so good? And there's maybe still some things that aren't translating very well, particularly on Facebook. So I don't know. I just feel like there's room there for a conversation of, how do we take this idea of active listening to, okay, when it gets real practical, like I'm actually putting something out there, not just for a PA, but something that people are consuming online while they're making pancakes on a Sunday morning or listening to when they can get to it during the week. Like I think there's an even more reason for it to be compelling because we want to engage people, especially with this message. But sometimes the tools and how we're deploying them aren't translating so well. So how can we help? Like, I know that's a huge topic.
A million things just went off.
Okay.
And I'll try to reel them in or disperse them periodically. One of the, as you're talking about things maybe not translating, and there was something else you said that made me think about, really what's happening here now is we're going from what we don't have anymore or what the engineer doesn't have anymore at their disposal is volume and is the emotion that comes with volume.
Yeah.
And particularly live sound, where there is a physical element to it, which you mentioned kind of masking deficiencies. You can kind of hide a lot. There's a lot of sleight of hand involved in just moving air.
Yeah.
So there's that's no longer there. The flaws and the realities of what are going on are more revealed now.
Yep.
And then, one thing that I would say is how could we help? If there's something I could impart, is now that we've gone from mixing on, depending on the size of your the house of worship that you're working at, the size of the speaker system, to a laptop, a phone,
right,
a TV. So what we're missing now is all of that, not just low end, but low mid. You're missing a lot. So where I'm going with this is embrace harmonic distortion and start to look and learn and listen a lot of and research about psychoacoustics and how our ear fills in the gaps, via harmonics. So, because no one's hearing that bass, no one's hearing that, if we can be technical, no one's hearing that 80 hertz anymore. Like, it's gone. Forget it. Focus on now on the shift that you can do with harmonic distortion. Let that rise up and they will hear that. I'll kind of leave it there for right now. But that's what I'm telling everyone right now. And that's what we're finding.
So some people in that context live may have heard the bass through the subs primarily because maybe their PA wasn't deployed 100% awesome. And so now that's gone. So to get the notes from the bass guitar,
right,
to your point, you're going to have to rely on those higher order harmonics,
right,
to be able to get the tone of the bass rather than just the woof that was in the subs.
Right.
I love that.
And don't be scared. When I mention harmonic distortion, that doesn't mean you need to have 30 plugins or 20 different bits of vintage gear. also embrace EQ in places that you never did before, because you're still just trying to shift the message. You're just doing it now. You've got a narrower, kind of more focused, microscopic type of window to work within.
Good. So before we go on to further technical stuff, I flashed an email that I got this week about going back to the management board tape conversation. Somebody who's in our MxU tribe got a note from their worship pastor, the MD on stage, who was listening back and actually wondered if there was something happening in the conversion between the console, like from what they were doing on stage to the digital console to how it got converted to be able to go out. Because when they listen back, the vocals are just flat. They don't sound very good.
Yeah.
And he thought that there was something technically wrong. I'm listening back and I'm thinking, you're just not a great singer.
Right.
So how do you have that conversation?
Wow.
Because there are some things that, like we said, the what used to be covered up with the big PA is now right in your face. That vocal, if we want it to be loud so that it's conveying the message of the lyric, it's got to be a good performance.
Yeah.
And when it's not, how can we sort of have that conversation?
Well, you're definitely blending this whole live performance versus recording situation thing in whole new ways. And I completely agree with you about, getting your levels right, because so I'm a worship leader on Sunday mornings at a church in Atlanta, but as a result of coronavirus, I am also doing tons of pre-records beforehand and getting it ready for broadcast. And because of my background as a producer and a recording engineer, I'm delivering everything at minus 14 lufs. And the reason why I'm delivering at minus 14 lufs is because that's the point where YouTube or Facebook will actually start dropping the level.
Yeah.
So you get it as hot as you can. But you're absolutely right. When you've got musicians on stage who are not used to having the microscope on their individual elements within a mix, it changes the whole ball game.
Yeah.
And so lots of effects.
That's what I suggested to our friend.
That's what
it's
I'm
like,
doing.
okay, maybe a little more reverb than you would typically, just to give it some space. It's almost like the way your PA would cover a multitude of sins in some ways. Additional effects can do that in a way.
Yeah.
And, we have tools like Auto-Tune or Waves Tune Real Time or some of those things that they may have been reluctant to admit that they needed.
Sure.
But if you A/B it to somebody and go, here's without, here's with, and you're using it properly, it can make a pretty good singer sound a lot better. So, but there's a lot of wiggle room there because you don't want to insult their ego.
And a lot of it depends on, too, if they're building a mix for Facebook Live or whatever through auxiliaries on the mixing desk.
Right.
You want to say to them, is there any way that you can patch in a different type of compressor that's going to go to that versus using the compression that you're using, and I'm not very adept at live sound, so probably that's an option on most digital desks. I just don't know.
So as side question, as an artist and an engineer, how is it mixing yourself?
I hate it. Absolutely hate it. Because we've decided, just for the sake of convenience and everything, we were doing the live thing for a while, but we were doing a live thing from 2 different locations and we were blending them together. We had some sort of switching unit.
Yeah.
But it was just more chaos than it needed to be. So eventually, after about a month, we decided to go to full pre-records. So I do all the music stuff pre-record. The pastor does all of the preaching pre-record, and everybody in between, and then they take it on Saturday evening and put it together.
Yeah.
It's not fun to mix yourself. No, it's not.
Well, nobody likes to hear themselves on tape really anyway. Like you hear a recording of your voice and it's a little awkward. I can't imagine if like it's the main thing and you're having to be the one to...
Yeah, it's not the best. No.
I think it's important too to jump back to a minute to what we were talking about in the last segment that, I always dubbed it, it's the ugly baby syndrome. It's like there's no such thing as an ugly baby.
Right.
But having to tell someone that your
baby's kind of ugly.
That's
good.
I
mean, and for the young people that are listening, I think there is, and I'm not going to get stay off my lawn and old man too much in this, but there is a conversation that needs to be had that I never will forget. My dad hung out with me in the studio for the first time. He sat back on the couch. It was just weird. A bunch of dads were there playing different things and ancillary instruments. And we left the studio and we're walking back to the house. And he said, man, I didn't realize the process of how much of a psychiatrist you really are. Mm-hmm. You know all this, and that's part of it. But being able to meet someone and have a conversation, especially with young people, that I was fortunate to kind of wrap my arms around with young people that were just starting a band, and the excitement and just the, unfiltered just rage and really great things that they were doing, and having a conversation at some point when because it's coming. It's like, well, do I have what it takes? And you have to have a conversation and be honest. It says yes and no, or these are things you need to work on, and be honest and have that conversation, and have the psychiatry of it. When you hit that point, and even if it is bad, you got to say, you've got to get your musicianship up. There's just this thing that drops all of a sudden, and everybody gets really comfortable in the room and stops thinking about it, and it starts to become really fun, and we're off.
And the message being, I want to be able to help you get there if I can.
Sure.
So I've got tools here that I can help you as you try to move in that direction.
Yes.
We're going to implement those tools, and we're going to try to get better together.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you if something's out of tune, or if you need to check the tuning on your guitar, or this performance just didn't quite have what it needed.
Yeah.
But you need to trust me.
Yes.
And it's difficult, especially sometimes in a church scenario, because the guy sitting in the chair building the mix works for the guy on stage who's having the problem. So it's like, how do you do that with your boss?
Yeah.
But you're working together to make a good musical choice.
I think something that I've noticed watching a bunch of these broadcasts on Sunday mornings when we're talking about houses of worship is the ones who have transitioned really well during this weird time of social distancing. There's been a lot of good stuff. There's been churches that have succeeded by altering their arrangements, simplifying their arrangements, making them much easier, much simpler, versus trying to, let's say, emulate note for note what the latest Hillsong or, North Point or whatever is doing, and simplifying their arrangements, because it takes a lot of stress off of those 20 extra channels, in the morning.
And the end game too of going, well, am I mixing for an iPhone? Am I mixing for a tablet or a computer or a car stereo? I mean, it's a lot of different variables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not having to, because to me, psychoacoustically, you mentioned that earlier, it's weird for me sitting in my office or my living room watching on my computer, and the people on the other end are pretending like it's as big as it used to be, or as loud as it was when we were live. It's not.
It's not.
I'm sitting here by myself in my room. I know that I'm not watching, a stadium show. So why try to make it feel like this big anthem moment? Maybe the best way to connect with me as a listener musically is to totally strip it down.
Sure.
And kind of meet me where I am in this sort of one-on-one moment. So one thing that we've talked to people about is, gosh, you may have to talk to your folks about actually looking into the camera lens.
Yeah.
Whereas before we trained you not to look at the camera because you're just on stage engaging everyone. Well, maybe you need to engage me, in the eyes. So that kind of stuff can be super helpful too.
True.
Kind of what I'm hearing here, not to put too glowing of a spin on it, but is, a lot of opportunities. In other words, when we started talking about that vocalist that has a question, it sounds really flat, or it sounds this or that. Of course, this is when we get into like reading the room, and you're going to know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Whether there's even a point in trying to educate, help, nurture, or just drop it and just let them talk. You're going to know. But let's assume that there is the ability to educate, to help further along this person. It might be that this might be the time where you're like, I've been looking for the opportunity to talk to this person about their mic technique, or about using tune, or about, for ourselves, maybe this is the opportunity to go, hey, you know what? COVID stinks. This is hard.
Yeah.
Let's embrace this and do the best we can with what we, you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
And I believe that while that is certainly a mode to operate under of let's make the most of this, I do feel people are becoming better mixers
I do too.
Yeah.
because everything is so under the microscope. And I'm telling you, it will translate.
Yeah.
It will absolutely 100% translate to the big mix when it comes back if you aren't already there. But again, when it comes to, the opportunities here, I can't tell you how many like fabricated conversations I've had with artists that it took me a year to find the right moment. And like here, I'm hearing a lot of opportunities. Maybe if you've got someone you can speak confidently to, you don't just like broach the idea of tune. You very confidently just go, yeah, you know what? We're not hearing it. You know what it is.
Yeah.
Now that we're hearing this in a more sort of modern, polished thing, think about what you hear on the radio. Everything's tuned. If we could just incorporate, boom, just you go
Just
at
be
'em.
direct.
Be direct.
Yeah.
Which is not saying you're horrible.
Right.
And it's like there's tactful ways to do it. So
Well, the cool thing about that in a church setting, especially, is that at the early stages of COVID and the lockdowns and all the stuff, everybody was in scramble mode. And so the production folks were the ones who saved the day because we're smart. We've got the solutions. We've got the technology. And so leadership that may not have ever even known how capable these folks were are now going, wait, these guys are great.
Right.
So now we finally have a voice in some ways to actually have those conversations. So it's almost been like it's opened the door
right.
to have what would have been a difficult conversation in a more confident way because there's a trust that's been established because, hey, I didn't know how to record a video. And now I'm making iPhone videos in my living room as the pastor, doing all that I need to do for Sunday by myself because you helped me with a good light and a good setting on my camera and a way to make it sound okay, and those kind of things. It's like they've built trust. So now they have the relational capital to have that more difficult conversation.
That's good. And I was going to say, look to the future too, that you may have now, I'm real big on having a seat at the table when it comes to production. And a lot of times audio, particularly when we're getting into kind of showbiz, you know what I mean? Where we're getting into lights, camera, action, audio's falling. It falls down that you have to fight to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And now, because as you were saying, what you just said was brilliant, relational capital, keep that. That's an asset.
Yeah.
And moving forward, don't leave.
Yeah.
You know,
as hard as you've had to fight for truck space on the tour.
Absolutely.
Fight for that relational capital.
You've got it now, and just now you're there, and just let this be a springboard, for what's to come. And I really do believe that that's what's possible now.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. So you guys being, in the live realm, so let's say vaccines come and we've taken care of coronavirus, and are we moving back to just purely live performance and not doing the streaming thing anymore? Or is that always going to be a secondary supplemental thing? Like even on tours, is that going to be a new thing?
I mean, that's the $1 million question. And if there's anything about this time that I've gotten the biggest kick out of, is the fact that for once, no one has the scoop.
Yeah.
There's no inside scoop. There's no one to call. No one knows. You know what I mean? And for the first few months of COVID, for me, I mean, while I love the art of what I do, I have become very well versed in the political aspect of it too. And I'm really good at it. For a few months, man, it was nice to take off from politics. You know why? Because no one knew.
Yeah.
There was not one single person I could call. Yet, once I did start to kind of talking to people again, it was funny how everyone's still grandstanding with their opinions.
Oh, yeah.
And
they think they know.
And their doctrine of, the president of name it is going to tell you exactly how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so to that point, I don't know. I had a video friend of mine, a touring video director who was, and I've heard this said a lot lately since then, was like, we were always moving towards things like Zoom and all these other things being a bigger part of our lives. This just hit fast forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference is they are the focal point of our lives now.
Right.
So I do think a lot of this is here to stay, but not to take the place. But again, that's just my opinion, but not to take the place of fully, particularly when it comes to a live performance. Because I do personally believe, of course, it's in my best interest to believe this, but that it is human nature to commune, to celebrate,
Absolutely.
to get together, and to do these things. And I think we will want to do that again.
Whether in church or not.
Absolutely.
It's a church, it's a football game, it's a concert, it's a family reunion, whatever those gathering spaces are, we have to get back to some of that. But in the church world, to answer your question, I personally think that the streaming thing and the social media engagement and all that there's no turning back.
Yeah.
We have to keep pouring gas on that and keep getting better at it, because, the average person in America who says they're a regular church attender is really only there a little over once a month anyway, in person. And I think we finally started to realize that. So now, how can we get so good at what we're doing to be engaging online such that people will want to be with us more regularly and more often? So let's go ahead and amp up the quality as much as we can on our stream mixes and on our content and on our approach to being creative. Then when we go back to being able to meet together, our mixes are going to be better. And honestly, we may reveal some flaws in our PA deployment and our acoustics, because it should translate from what I'm doing on a board mix to what you're hearing in the room. So if it doesn't, okay, let's put some resources toward making that even better. So it's kind of a both and they can both kind of build on each other.
Cool.
And again, here I'm hearing like opportunity, and in this case, the opportunity to reach more people. There's some people that literally, they might have anxiety about going in crowds, and they've had it well before COVID.
Yeah.
And now there's a means of reaching them there. So it's like, again, kind of seeing the silver linings here. There are quite a few, and I'm with you, particularly in House of Worship, and mainly, House of Worship has really shined during this time, because the House of Worship world has continued in a remarkable fashion. Like, no matter what, they have just done everything possible to keep going. And they're the only ones that have pulled it off.
And other live events have stayed completely shut down. And will be. Like, first thing to get shut off, last thing to get turned back on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so now you look at like all of these new facets of and I've told a number of equipment manufacturers this. I'm like, right now, guys, the House of Worship market, because not only are they redefining themselves in the moment, they're redefining themselves for the future too.
Yeah.
Now that's this multifaceted production thing going on. So
you made a great point. We brought in several bands and done live production, and one of which, BJ Barham from American Aquarium, really had a great point that he said, this has been an eye-opening experience for me as the kind of the cultivator of this band, American Aquarium, that I've been able to reach thousands more people than we've ever been able to reach on a high audio video quality, that I'm going to continue to do this for the people that have anxiety that can't come, or the towns that we don't go to.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not a replacement, but it's nice to have as a supplemental operator for somebody that's not there.
Particularly for like a younger person. What we're talking about here is additive to our industry as we know it. It's just getting through this and seeing that there is lack of work now. I'm telling you, on the other side of this, there is more work, because these things are now they're part of what we do.
And from an artist perspective, who may really have been struggling with, okay, I'm not selling physical units of my music anymore. It's all streaming. How can I monetize the experience for the fan if I can't have a concert? What does that look like? It's like there are a lot of questions, but there are also a lot of opportunities. And I think that's key to what you're saying is, gosh, maybe it's a place like this where they come and do a small concert and then have something that they can sell as a stream. That's the concert experience that's captivating and engaging, but I can do it from home.
Meeting people where they are.
Yeah, it's very cool. Glass half full, guys. That's what the
That's it.
league of medium handsome gentlemen needs to be.
Well, then what I'll do is every Saturday I'll send you multi-tracks of me so that you guys can mix for Sunday, so that I don't have to.
There you go.
That's a deal.
Yeah.